Welcome to Cordell and Cordell's Men's Divorce Podcast, moderated by Managing Partner and CEO Scott Trout, bringing you information for guys before, during, and after divorce, and everything related to family law. This podcast is not to be taken as legal advice, and no attorney-client relationship is established.
Welcome back to the Men's Divorce Podcast. I'm Scott Trout, Managing Partner, CEO of Cordell and Cordell. And today we're going to talk a lot about child support. You've been really probably thinking about child support in the wrong way. I mean, there's a lot of do's and don'ts. So you want to pay attention, get a piece of paper and a pen, take some notes today. As always, it's not legal advice, as you know. We just want to give you some information, some tips, some information that you can go to the web and find out more details. And if you want a consultation, that's the best way to get legal advice. You can go to our website at cordellcordell.com or give us a call at 866-DADS-LAW. We can do a consultation via the web just like this, in person, on the phone, whatever's convenient for you. So give us a call. So I'm joined by one of the Cordell and Cordell attorneys up in Boston. Welcome, Brittany.
Hi, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Well, great. I'm glad you joined. Let's talk about child support. It's something, typically we've talked about child support, get real technical. We've gone through the formulas, but here's some great do's and don'ts. I mean, I think this, especially, with economic uncertainty, we've got inflation, the consumer price inflation index came out today. It's crazy. And there may be some things that you maybe want to think about that may be affecting you, whether you're getting increases or decreases. But, I think when I at least talk to guys that come in, they want to say, look, what am I paying child support for? I see her taking vacations, or she's buying smokes, or she just got a new Escalade. I get it. And, it's one of those things. So let's kind of maybe have you set the groundwork. What are they really, what's it for?
Yeah. So one important thing to remember is that child support is for your child. I know it goes directly to either your ex-spouse or the children's mother, but remember, it's for your child. The main things that it's meant to cover are things like rent, mortgage, heat, electricity, food, those typical expenses that you would see if the two of you were still together, that you would maybe split. It's to ensure that your child is the least disrupted in their life, in their lifestyle when parents separate. The courts want to try to level out the incomes of the two parties so that when they go to dad's house, they may be living in a mansion and having all these vacations, but they want to make sure that when they're at mom's house too, they have the same sort of things. You want to make sure that your child is provided for. And that's the main thing you need to remember, especially in these situations. I know, as you mentioned, the economic climate is kind of crazy at the moment and things are shifting and changing. But remember, you want to keep your child's life as steady as possible, especially during trying times, whether it's a divorce or a separation or anything like that.
Child support's formulaic for the most part across the country. And I mean, you're in Massachusetts, I'm in Missouri, I'm licensed in Illinois and Georgia. And of my three states I'm licensed, every one of them is different,
Right.
albeit there's a formula, right?
Correct. So each state has a specific formula. The main portion of the formula that the states and the courts will look at are the income of the two parties. Like we said, each state is different. Some states deduct out certain expenses. Here in Massachusetts, we look at a new guideline just came out and they added in Social Security. Some expenses that come out are health insurance, dental insurance, any other support that may be paid to other children, as well as daycare or expenses such as those. But again, each state is different. So you want to make sure you talk to your attorney about what your specific state may deduct from the income.
Yeah. And every state being different, every case is different. I mean, I think that's what I always tell clients is, I get it's not, albeit it's formulaic, it doesn't mean it's automatic. I mean, there are gives and, for us, there's a custody adjustment, there's a way to handle daycare expenses, whether they're in or out of the chart or the formula. So I think that's for the takeaway for guys is ask a lot of questions and say, look, okay, here's the magic word. Can we deviate from the formula? And that's the one you want to ask about. A lot of lawyers, I think, are afraid to argue for a deviation. I think it's important to force the deviation where it's appropriate and where you have a good, legitimate reason to argue. And I think that's really, really key.
Right. And as you mentioned, it's really important too to remember that each case is different. what may be the case for your friend or your neighbor. Even if you have similar incomes, it may not be the case in your case, so to speak. Incomes change, like we said, deviations are possible. There are ways that you can attribute income or impute income. If one person is underemployed and should be working more, has the ability to work more, but just doesn't because they either want more support or they want to pay less support, that's something the court's going to look at. And it's really important to talk to your attorney or talk to an attorney about these situations to make sure that you're covered to the best extent possible, and that any income that should be attributed or imputed is, so the support order is as correct as it should be.
So talking about income, that's the big, $90 million question, especially during
Yeah.
COVID back in 2020,
Right.
We saw guys going, they're getting unemployed and they're working from home or they're layoffs. So
Yeah.
what do we do, or what are the effects of increasing and decreasing income? Because now we have this yin yang. We've got, we hit rock bottom, and now guys are you've seen
Right.
a job economy, an environment where people are having to pay substantially more income to get workforce. So what's the effect of a decreasing and increasing income when it comes to child support?
Right. Again, I think, and everyone will probably get sick of hearing this, but it's really important you talk to an attorney, especially if there's been a decrease in your income. You want to make sure that that decrease is not voluntary, that you're not purposely taking a lower paying job if you have the ability to maintain the status quo, so to speak. I always recommend to people that come in for consultations or to my clients that if you know a new job is on the horizon, reach out to your attorney as soon as that's a possibility. Because the sooner, at least in Massachusetts, the sooner we can get a case filed, the sooner the support order can change. Here in Massachusetts, support orders can be retroactive to the date of service of any complaint. So you want to make sure that if there's especially a decrease in your income, that you get those orders and those complaints filed as soon as possible, so that you can have that taken care of. The longer you wait, the more you're on the hook for the higher support, and you want to make sure that that's lowered as soon as possible.
It is, it's one of those. I had a client come in and he talked about, I want to go back on child custody, but I've got a huge increase in income since
Right.
we've rolled out of COVID. And those are the things, and you say, you can't say it enough, it is so true. A consultation is worth its weight in gold, just to know what, strategically what you should be doing,
Right.
legally what is allowable, and then kind of getting that, say, hey, here's what I would recommend. Let's wait and kind of see what happens. So now let's talk about, bonuses, commissions. I think that's a big variable as well.
Right.
When we think about, it's really easy for us to talk about a W-2 employee who has a salary with no overtime, no commission, no bonuses. What do you do with that?
So there are a lot of different ways that those different types of payment structures can be approached. We try to give our clients all of the options and say, look, this is one way that we can deal with bonuses or commissions. This is another way. For example, we can take an average, say you get certain bonuses over the past 5 years. Well, we take an average of those bonuses and say, look, this is what he is making over the past 5 years for bonuses. That's going to be included. We can also, especially for commissions, argue that the other person will get a percentage of your commissions. So if you get a commission every 3 months, you are entitled to provide your ex with a certain amount of that commission. That way, if you don't get a commission, you're not on the hook for anything extra. So it's really important to kind of go through those different options and the different possibilities with your attorney and say, look, these are the possibilities that we can do. This is the one that will likely work best for you and your situation, and then kind of go from there.
Yeah, bonuses, infrequent, kind of a one-time bonuses. Obviously, the other side wants to throw them in. Our argument is like, look, hey, it's not likely to repeat. It was a holiday bonus that they haven't paid in years. So again, those are the types of things, is bringing a paycheck stuff, bringing your tax return from the year before. Let's kind of talk about those. But I guess it gets complicated. Like I represent right now a self-employed owner who owns their own business, and they put a lot of their income they could take back into the business to make it really more valuable. Or there's issues like they use a credit card for personal expenses. It gets a little bit dicey, tricky when it talks about self-employment income, right?
Yep. Self-employment, is often scrutinized a lot more than W-2. As you mentioned, there are certain expenses that you may be able to take out for your business on tax returns and things of that nature, but for child support purposes, the court may add them back in. For example, here in Massachusetts, if you deduct your vehicle expenses or cell phone expenses or depreciation, those things can be argued that they be added back in. Again, this is always something that we can negotiate, but you want to be careful also because the judges are mandated reporters to the IRS. So make sure that everything you are telling to your attorney, you want to provide them all the documentation they need to adequately represent you, especially when you're self-employed, because like I said, the judges do scrutinize self-employed people more than they do a regular W-2 employee.
Yeah, they'll go through with a fine-tooth comb, no doubt. And it does get a bit more difficult, but I think there's some advantages. Like I said, I represent a guy that he's in the service industry and there's some things he's in, that he needs to continue the job. There's money sitting in a checking account in the business, and it's required for him to get bids. And so there's ways around it, not to fear when you have self-employed income. I think it's all about strategy and preparation. Yep. So there's guys out there, obviously, that pay child support via wage assignment or wage withholding. They have to be concerned if they're changing jobs that they kind of move that on to the next job. And also, but at the same time, you don't want to decrease your own income just for the point of paying less, or setting yourself for a modification. Talk a little bit about that.
Right. So one thing we see a lot is if you are paying through wage assignment and you either switch jobs or you lose your job, that wage assignment doesn't stop. The state is still going to expect you to pay whatever amount is ordered. So I always tell my clients, again, if you know that a job loss is coming or a change in job is coming, be proactive about it and make sure that these things are taken care of. At least here in Massachusetts, you can simply send in the payments to our Department of Revenue and they'll credit it right to the account. So you want to make sure that if there is a lag time, which there usually is, at least here in Massachusetts, between the new job taking effect and your old job ending, you want to make sure those payments are still consistent and that they're getting where they need to go. So if that means you have to send a check every month to the Department of Revenue, you do that just to make sure that no arrearage gets racked up, because oftentimes with the arrearage, there may be interest or fees or penalties or things, and you obviously want to avoid those to the most extent possible.
A lot of things, guys that are watching, listening, they're either divorced or there's a lot that are thinking about it or in the middle of divorce. There's something that I use the phrase springing clauses, things that provide, for example, in your decree or in your agreement, if this, then that, kind of a springing from this to that. So you often see self-adjusting clauses. Some states prohibit them, some allow them, where, for example, child support shall be $200 until the child reaches school age, age 8. And then it's this, or then it's that. If then once they graduate high school, if there's provided for post-majority support, something like that. That's something to be on the lookout for or to consider.
Yep. Another thing that goes along with that we see a lot of times is a lot of people will exchange tax documents every year after they get their taxes done to see if a change in support would be necessary. Again, you want to talk to your attorney. I know I've said it a ton of times, but you want to make sure you're talking to your attorney, one, before agreeing to something like that, and two, when the time comes to do it, before you agree to something like that, because you want to make sure that you're not opening yourself up to a large increase substantially over time. And again, at the same time, you want to make sure that it's the best thing for you. And in your case, in your situation, once you do agree to do it and you exchange the documents, again, you want to make sure that the correct numbers are being used, the correct formulas are being used. So it's important to discuss, hey, look, I got my tax returns today. I got my ex's tax returns. Can you help me run the numbers and see what support would be if it's changing, if it's worthwhile to file a modification?
Yeah, I think you have to be careful with springing clauses just because I think it can hurt you in the future. Judges have said to me, look, your clients anticipated this. This was part of the bargain. This was a contemplated action. So therefore, I'm going to deny your motion to modify and to alter the amount. And I think it's just, it has to be advantageous. And I know you mentioned it, I mentioned it. And that is, consult with an attorney. It's just like medicine. Sometimes you don't know how much medicine to take. Well, consult with a doctor, because
Right.
they're the ones you need to have, to get the right advice to get the outcome you expect. Because if I want to get better, I want to get over this fever or this cough, what should I take? I want to get
Yep.
better. So you can self-represent, and I think it's dangerous. I don't even do that myself, in matters. I want someone who's, disconnected from it. I wouldn't do it myself. So as we kind of wrap through in our conversation today, let's kind of end on the note that I think does get a little bit complicated, and it's a pressing question: is when do I stop paying child support? Now that obviously changes across the country.
Yep.
I had a Court of Appeals case where I was dealing with a client who got an order in Oklahoma, but he lived in Missouri. And Missouri, at the time, child support went to 22. In Oklahoma, where the divorce decree was entered, it stopped at 18. Well, mom was trying to press it forward to 22. And that's the question: is when do I stop? It gets really complicated when child support is authorized post high school, because do you still pay the full amount? I think, again, that's an opportunity where we can be really creative and really strategic. If you're talking about college age kids, when you live in a state in which child support's really still required.
Right. So like you said, it does vary state to state. So it's important to kind of look at what your state, we call it here in Massachusetts, emancipation laws say. Unfortunately, there is some gray area. So again, it's important to kind of discuss that gray area, see how you fall into it. I always advise my clients, don't ever stop paying without a court order. If there is an agreement that says, okay, I can stop paying on X date, that's fine. But without that court order, do not ever stop paying, because you open yourself up to contempt charges, and it's avoidable. Don't ever stop paying, even if your ex owes you money. If you think you should be paying less, you either have to file a modification or file something with the court to get something signed by the judge saying it's okay to either stop paying if the time is right, or to pay less if, again, a modification is appropriate. But don't ever voluntarily stop paying, especially without consulting an attorney first, because you just open yourself up to liability that is avoidable.
And I think when you've got, for example, Missouri, which again, I mentioned kind of a little bit, our child support goes to 21, which pushes a child into college. And there's an opportunity for us to consider a way to say, okay, instead of paying full formulaic child support, let's reduce it if the child's away. Let's say they're out of the state of Missouri, because we're unique in that divorced parents are required to pay for college for kids in Missouri for their tuition, which is a very unique law. So I think for guys listening, go out there, have that conversation, say, hey, is there an opportunity for me to file a motion to modify now that my child is away at school? Because, think about it. We started this conversation of what is child support for? And that is rent, utilities, food, all the things that you're probably maybe double paying already. In Missouri, I have a guy that's going to be paying 50% of tuition, room, and board. So why would I pay full room and board or 50% here and also 50% of room, tuition, and board to my ex-spouse when they're not incurring it? So great example. Take advantage of a consultation. Brittany, great stuff today. Thanks for providing the do's and the don'ts and kind of putting people back on the path of getting to the information. So thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
So again, schedule that consultation. We always say it a lot. Brittany said it here. 866 Dad's Law. Spend that hour. Find an attorney who practices exclusively in family law like we do. We have offices around the country, including the United Kingdom. Check us out on the web, cordellcordell.com or cordellcordell.co.uk if you are in the United Kingdom. But give us a call, 866 Dad's Law. We can take care of that consultation via Zoom, via WebEx, just on the web, just like this, in person, or on the telephone. So until next time, have a great week.